Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back. So on my bench this time around, I got an SP Golden West Service patch out boxcar. This is the very popular, the older SP boxes that pretty much went everywhere after the all the mergers took place, and all these went to Union Pacific. A lot of these run around with SP, SSW, Rio Grande patch jobs basically. Some of them have been repainted to UP, but most of them are still in Golden West paint, and they're in pretty bad shape. This one in particular is an Athearn Genesis model I recently picked up. Now I got two of these. I'm going to do the other one later, but the first one we have here is SP 694650, and I want to, before I tell anything about what I'm going to do here, I want to mention two things. I've already gone ahead and done some work to this car. I prepped it with a dull coat finish, and I've also applied some airbrush primer weathering, just kind of as like an overlay or a backdrop for all of the brush work that I'll be sequentially doing to this. And I like to use the airbrush for primer weathering. I don't like to rely on the airbrush for an entire car body weathering, just because it's only one solid effect, and even if you mix the colors together or change the colors around, it's still one flat effect that looks about the same every single time. So I still like to, if I do it this way, I still like to do all of the brush work afterwards, and then have the airbrush work underneath as like a base coat or a primer coat. That's why I call the airbrush work the primer weathering, if you will. So that's what I've gone ahead and done with this car, and I decided I wasn't going to show that process because I already demonstrated some airbrush techniques in one of the videos I showed when I faded down an airbrush faded a tank car. This is pretty much the same effect. It's only my grime mix, my black and earth brown mixed together, and it's just all sprayed. I hit the underbody up pretty well, did the ends, and then the roof. It's all pretty much primed and it's ready to go. So the first problem I need to mention with this car, and this is the second thing I wanted to mention, I was looking heavily on road picture archives and all over Google Images, trying to find pictures of this exact car, and like most cars that Athearn, Walthers, Atlas, any of these companies make these days, you can never find this exact car number. It's extremely frustrating. I like to try to be as accurate as possible when I do this stuff, right? So it's just one of those things, they make cars like this, and then you can never exactly find the prototype to back up any of this work that they did on the car. So it's just one of those things. When in doubt, you got to try to make do with what you got. The best thing to go about doing in this situation is to just look at prototype photos of similar cars, decide how the weathering looks, decide what kind of graffiti you want to use, and it's better than trying to guesstimate and then kind of being wrong, because at least you're weathering from a similar car or the same car type, so that's it's better than doing it from scratch, in my opinion. So I got, like I said, the primer weathering on, and I went ahead and put another dull coat finish over this. That way it's ready to go here. I haven't found exact photos I want to use yet, but I've done a couple of these so far, and they all pretty much weather the same. So what I'm going to do first is just go ahead and prep the car body for the work. And the first things I'm going to do is start masking out some of this car data here. As you guys know, this all gets at the very bottom of these cars. They just get plastered with graffiti, especially going out west through Los Angeles, anywhere in California. These things get plastered with graffiti, and I'm going to basically trash this thing. And the same thing with the other car, SP 694766, which I'll do later. So I'm not going to be worrying too much about all this down here. But if you're doing a car that's relatively light on graffiti, you'll want to pay more attention to the weathering in the areas down here. But in this case, since I'm going to be putting mostly graffiti at the bottom of the car, the primary focus will be working on the trucks and the top of the car. So we'll go ahead and get started here. Alright, so before I do any of the grime work, I'm going to fade the lettering here and all of these blocks down just a little bit with a whitewash, because these graphics do fade. Sometimes they just completely rust over, but in this case I'm going to model one with the faded logo. So I got my acrylic white here, and I got a fine tip brush, and I'm just going to go ahead and start. And you just want to create like a little wash for this. I demonstrated some of these techniques. I did a Union Pacific gondola this way. I have a video of that a little ways back now, but this is basically the same technique for logo fading. You just take your fine tip brush and you just work around the lettering just to white it out. So I'm just gonna start working on this, and you may have to go over this several times to get the exact, exactly the way you want it, but I don't want to fade this too much, but I definitely want them to look a little bit faded here. I'll clean up some of this with a micro brush later. So you can see I'm going a little bit heavier on the red, but I'm just kind of sloppily spreading out. You can of course be a little bit more precise if you have better steady hands, but because of the way I'm working at this, I'm just you know, putting it right over. I'll clean most of the you know, the paint on the outside of these squares up in a second with the brush, but I'm just going a little light with the washes and just brushing it over. Just work this in like this. Okay, so that's pretty good right there. I'll put a little bit on there. If you look at the Golden West logo, you can see some of these letters are darker than others, and this is just an interesting little variation in the color. Something that's a really neat little technique to do is just skip some of these letters to make them look, you know, because these weather differently. They get different layers of fade. Even though they're all faded, some of them are darker than others. You'll notice this on a lot of these cars, so this is what I try to focus on. So some of these I just went a little bit lighter on the wash, and it adds a little bit of variety to this, and it looks really cool. Okay, so I got my micro brush now. And I'm going to dip this in a little bit of rubbing alcohol. And I'm just going to carefully try to start cleaning up some of the lettering. Just be careful with this stuff. You don't want to rub the micro brush tip applicator and the stuff you just put on. And if it does, you can just touch it up with the brush again, but just as long as it looks even and you can't tell that you touched it up. You want this all to look very even, remember that. So I'm just going over this. Alright, so you can see I did a little bit of fading, and it's covered pretty well, and you can see it looks a bit rough too, but keep in mind we're going to do some washes down the sides of this that'll cover all this up. I'm going to go ahead and start doing some earth brown over this, just to kind of blend this out a little bit. Just here and there to again add some variety to the lettering, to kind of show some like grime getting under the graphics, and when they start to peel they just rust. Remember, this may take time, but details like this are what make the model, in my opinion. So just take your time, do this to whatever extent you want. If, of course, you're doing this off of a prototype, and follow the prototype photos as best as you can. But since I'm doing this not based on any particular prototype, remember, I couldn't find the photos of this exact car. I'm just doing this based on some photos of some other cars I've seen. Like I said, I've done a couple of these so far, and they all pretty much weather about the same. So I'm just going to start doing this here. And what I'm doing now is sort of going back and forth between using my earth brown, and I'm also using Model Master. This is a burnt umber, and so it creates a really nice rust halo effect around some of the darker grime, which is the earth brown. So it works pretty well. It looks pretty realistic, pretty convincing. And of course, I've showed it before, but you can also take some black and sometimes make some heavier spots. You can mix a little bit of brown and black together, and that'll create some nice little rust spots in this, just to kind of have some more defined little rust spots in this. But for the most part, I'm keeping the color pretty consistent. I won't go too much crazier with this, but just putting some little spots just here and there. And then I'll go to the burnt umber. I'm going to just make a small dilution with the water, and then I'm going to go over this stuff here. Again, with a wash like this, it creates a nice little rust halo effect, and it has that nice reddish rust kind of tint to it. That's why burnt umber is such a popular color for this, because it's very convincing. So I'm not going to get too much crazier with the detail on this logo, but you get the basic idea with this. It just adds a little bit of variety, and it looks a little bit more realistic now. So I still got to do all that on this side. I've already faded it down, so this is what I'm going to try to do next, is this logo. Also, I've gone ahead and masked off some areas like the car data, plate C, the data here, and the data on this little bit here. And I just put on some tape over them, that way when I put the graffiti over them, I can peel them off and it'll look like relatively fresh patching and stenciling. So I've taken care of the lettering, and I've also taken care of these little squares, and we're pretty much ready to start weathering the car body here. And I could have done this all with the airbrush, but again, like I stated before, the problem with the airbrush is you get one solid flat finish and it just doesn't look right. I like to have different layers of grime on this, and the best way to do this is with the brush, also because you're getting nice brush strokes which follow closely to the look of grime being run down by rain, when you can actually see the streaks of grime. Compared to it being just a spray, which looks very unrealistic. I have a special brush that I recently purchased, and this thing has been my best friend. This is another Citadel, special Citadel brush I use specifically for washes. And I've went ahead and loaded up the bristles with my earth brown and black mixture, as you can see here. This is pretty much the accurate color as it looks. And I'm going to take the brush and dip it in a little bit of water. You don't necessarily have to use a bowl of water either. Some people like to use plates, and I do think that that is a good method too. You can take a plate, load your paint on it, and then mix your dilution in the plate. But I myself, I like to use a bowl just to mix the paint. And you make this pretty thin with a lot of water. I couldn't tell you the exact consistency. It's pretty thin, but you're just creating a wash here, okay? And now you take this and start working it down the car body sides to darken it. Get it in all these little nooks and crannies. Don't overwork this. Just spread it out enough so that it's nice and even on the car body, like this. And again, I'm not too worried about down here because this is all going to be graffiti, but basically you can build this up in layers until you're happy with the effect. And I'm just going to, like I said, do this in layers until I'm pretty satisfied and I got it to the tone I want. I'm going to darken this up pretty substantially just because I want to take away most of that blue. I'm also going to hit the door up here. Of course the door, it's going to be a little bit harder with the door because you've got to work around all of the little details, but basically it's just working around them and making sure you get all of this covered up. You can go and do vertical and horizontal strokes around these little seams and struts and stuff, but once you get everything covered, you then want to take the brush and just go back over it and make your vertical streaks like this. And basically you repeat this as many times as you need this. And the other nice thing here, if I take the camera off the tripod, this is wet for now, but what's nice about it is that it starts to fill in all of the cracks, crevices, and the weld marks and the rivet details like this. It makes them pop very nicely. So I'm just going to repeat this process until I get the desired effect. What I don't recommend you do at this point is turn the car over and do the other side. Though it's tempting and it would save you time, don't do it, because then if you take the car and flip it over, whatever surface you're putting it on, you'll scratch off your wet wash here. You want this to dry thoroughly before you do it, or before you even turn the car over. So keep that in mind. So I'm just going to let this dry and then we'll put some more washes over this. Okay, so I'm zoomed out a bit here. This way you can actually see what I'm doing here. If you notice too, because we did the wash, it really helped to tone down that bright rusty colored grime that we had sprayed on previously. You can see it's starting to tone down a little bit. I'm going to zoom back in just a little, but I want you guys to kind of see what I'm doing here. I'm going to load the bristles back up and then start making more of my fade mix. It's very simple to do this, by the way. I'm just going for a consistent color of this grime tone here. What you see on the brush, this color. I'm mixing it in water, and I'm just tapping the brush against the side of the bowl just to get a nice consistent bit of paint mixture here with the water. And we're going to go ahead and start applying wash number 2. This time I'm starting from this side. And again, just like the first time, working in all those railings. Just keep streaking it down. You can go like this too if you want, because then you'll be able to substantially cover the bottom half of the car. Go ahead and pick up more wash here. I'm going to keep working around the door. Make sure you get under these railings too, that's very important. You don't want to leave those blank because you'll notice that if you leave them blank. Okay. Make a little bit more. Try to keep this color consistent. It's never going to be the exact same mixture every single time, but that's the magic of this, because the color will never be exactly the same, so you have a color variation, which is prototypical anyways, because real rust is going to be in different tones anyways all over the car body. It's not always going to be the one exact same color every time, and that's the biggest mistake a lot of modelers do, is they choose one color, stick with it, whether the entire car with that color, including the trucks and couplers. It looks very, very, very unrealistic. The key here is to use different colors and build it up so you get that multicolored effect that you see on real weathered cars. That's the key to this. So I'm going to go ahead and keep streaking this down. And again, work into the cracked crevices, get on that railing. You get a little piece of debris right there. Not sure what that's from. I'm going to try to remove that. And then just cover it back over. I'm going to wipe some of the grime off on this paper towel here. And I'm going to take a little bit of this crap here off too. Just notice that. I'm going to go over it just a little bit drier this time, just to take off all of the little bits of, dried paint remnants and stuff like that that's on this. Okay, looks pretty good right there. Just a little bit, not too much. There we go. Alright, so you can see it's toned down pretty much to where I want it. It's a good base for the graffiti and all of the detail weathering work that we're going to start doing to the car body. The other nice thing too about, I should mention something here, I did not clear coat over the Golden West logo after I finished it. Now, if you remember, I put a whitewash on this, and you can see it's starting to streak down a little bit. We're going to leave that because that's actually a bonus effect that we just got from that. It's pretty cool, so I like it. So we're going to let this dry, and then we'll move on to the other side, and I'll basically just repeat this process over and over again until I get it just about like this on the other car, on the opposite car side. Okay, so I got the washes done. I did about 2 to 3 washes per side to get it toned down just to where I want it, to where it has that grayish kind of hue now, and then you got the grime tones over it. You can see we've darkened up the panel lines there as well, which is important on these. And on this side, you guys can see that. I know the lighting isn't too great, but you get the basic idea. What I'm going to do now is try to clean up this patchwork here. Alright, so I have a Q-tip, and I want to clean up these patches here, because these are still relatively fresh. But I'm going to try to work around the sills here, because I don't want to take the grime off those. Still want those to have that bit there. So I've just started putting some of the rust streaks on here, and I'm trying to look at some photos of another car, a similar SSW car, to get the idea of where to put some of these rust streaks. But mainly they build up around this top railing here, and it's just important to try to put them all on here. You can do this with dry brushing too, but the problem with dry brushing is that you won't get all these fine lines. The best way to do this is to paint the lines on by hand with a fine tip brush like I'm doing here, and then follow behind with dry brushing over it, and mixing different rust colors in between too, to break away from them all looking about the same. And of course, work around the door a little bit too. Make sure to put the rust in all of these little railings and stuff. And keep it random too. You don't want this to all look perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the burnt umber. And I'm going to dry brush this on here with just a little bit of paint. And just carefully put in some paint here. But this is going to add some color variation to my rust. So you can see I'm just using the dry brushing techniques and slowly but surely enhancing the rust to what I want it to be. Don't ever try to attack this right away by putting a bunch of paint on there. A lot of newbies will come in and they'll try to do that, and I highly recommend you don't do that, because all you're doing is building up a heavy layer of paint and the rust is going to be extremely heavy. You want this to be relatively light, or you want to build it to be light rather. So just take your time with this. Build it up in little bits at a time. And I'm really going to try to concentrate the reddish rust in this area here where these rust streaks are. For everything else, I'll try to stick to a grime coat mix. Okay, so I'm going to switch to my earth brown black mix again. And I'm going to go in here and continue to put some grime on the door. And I've switched to my fine brush here, my fine medium brush basically. I'm just going to do some dry brushing to do some more defined streaking here. And I'm just going to pretty much put it in the corners of the door posts here. This is generally an area where you'll have a lot of grime kind of start to streak down. So I'm just going to start working that down. And blend it out. Grab a little more paint. But basically what I'm trying to do, like I said, I'm trying to make these struts, these door supports, these door posts all really kind of stand out a little bit better. Alright, so I'm going to continue to do the dry brushing effects. And I'm going to be going along the top railing again and down this top quarter of the car along the roof line where the majority of the grime gathers. And what you see on these cars is a very dark grime rust color. So I'm using my darker brown mixed with the flat black to do this. And it's of course going to be heavier along the rail, but I'm going to start lightening it up a little bit with a little bit more brown as we get on the opposite side of the door here. So I'm going to continue to keep working this, and I'm using my fine medium brush here. I like to switch between brushes for various effects. It's another nice little technique to use, is to switch brushes for various effects, because different brushes will give you different effects, as you guys know. I continue to lighten that up a little bit. I'm going to continue to put some grime along the seams You can see we're starting to darken these up a little bit. They're standing out a little bit more with this effect. And you can fill in a little bit between them as well with the dry brushing to create some of that streaking from the rust and everything running down the roof. So I'm working on the end now real quick, and you can see I've done some dry brushing effects around the top post and around the seams in between these raised panels. And I've also tried to focus in a little bit on the kick up here by darkening it just a little bit. And what I'm going to do now is make the defining lines just for the kick up. If I can get this back in focus here. Alrighty, so now I'm gonna, with the ends pretty much completed, I'm gonna start focusing on the top railing and finishing this up a little bit. And once again, I'm gonna follow behind with my burnt umber. So I'm just gonna pick a little bit up with the brush. Dilute it just a little bit, not too much. And then continue just with the dry brushing effects. Fan it out pretty good on this paper towel here. And then start shaking it down. Again, keeping it very random. Pick up a little bit more. Let's see if I can get, there you go. Just working around the doors, the door posts, all that. So I'm going to go ahead and take a break and work on the trucks a little bit. And as you guys know, I use my grime mixture for the trucks, which is a flat black with the brown again, and it's just a subtle earth tone that matches nicely for most of these trucks. Depending on the prototype, you can adjust this mixture. If they're a bit rustier, you can add a little orange in there. You can lighten it up with some brown. You can darken it some more with black. It's really your call on that, depending on what kind of prototype you're modeling. And then I'm going to go in with the straight earth brown. There we go. Now, I use the straight earth brown first off, the straight earth brown, excuse me, to go in the wheel, put the paint in first, and then I'll follow behind later and put in the chucks. And I'm going to do the interior wheel face. I won't get into too much detail with the trucks here. You guys know how I do them. I've shown a couple times how really to do this. And of course you guys can, you know, take this example and use it as you please. But the technique should pretty much follow like it is in real life. The other important thing here too is to clean the wheel rims. Now some cars will have these grimed over, but most general service freight cars that go through hump yards will have the clean rims like these. And so you'll want to keep those clean by taking a wet Q-tip and just wiping them off while the paint is wet. Alright, so the roofs on these get pretty moderately weathered, and they usually get a heavy grime wash on the roof, which is generally plain white, the panels anyways. I've already sprayed this with the grime tone mixture earlier in the stages of weathering, and I'm going to go ahead and follow behind with some earth brown mixed with just a very, very slight hint of a dark black, still mixed in the brush. I haven't cleaned this from the last procedure where I actually was using the earth grime mixture for the trucks. That way some of the black will mix in with that and automatically create the color I'm looking for here. And I'm just going to go in and start darkening some of these panels, just kind of in random spots, just to have that neat effect. And generally what happens with these is every couple panels apart they'll be darker, and then the ones in like the middle here will be cleaner, which is I think really interesting. I'm not sure why that is, but you see that a lot on these cars, and that's what I'm going to try to basically copy here. So again, I'll pick up some more paint, continue to layer it in here till those are pretty dark, and then just continue to work it in like this. And I try to dab this on, right? Once I've basically taken like this and applied it to the panel, I like to blotch it on to take away any kind of rust or the streaking or anything like that. That way it looks like blotchy textured rust, like what these get. And you can of course kind of vary the color of these darkened panels, but generally you want to keep them about the same color. You'll just see very subtle variations in them. I'm going to try to blend this color in with the sides of the top quarter of the car as well as I go along here. Again, pretty much all through dry brushing with whatever paint's left on the brush, just to fan it out and make things kind of blend together, because that's the key with this. You want all of these colors to blend together very nicely, just like how it pretty much works on the prototype. You'll have dramatic changes of color sometimes in certain places, but generally along the roof and on the top quarter of any car like this, everything usually is blended together pretty well. So you really want to take the time to put the attention in the detail and make sure that you get everything blended together really nicely. Make sure the colors are relatively the same, and just blend it out. Okay, so now I've mixed up a nice dark burnt sienna color here with a mixture of my rust oxide, a little burnt umber to basically create a nice little color here to make some brighter reddish oxidized rust in these panels. And again, I'm just going to blotch it in and try to keep things random. And you can build this up in how many layers you need to get the effect. But as long as you get those reddish oxidized tints in the roof, that's what you're going to try to go for here. Now I'll mix a little bit more of this oxide color. So now I'm going to take a much lighter mixture of the rust tone, and then again start mixing into these panels just to enhance some of these a little bit, just in little random spots to break away from one solid color. But again, blending everything together so it looks natural. You don't want violent color contrasts. You want it to look natural, just like the real thing. So just blend this together. Alright, so I'm going to do the splatter for the kick-up on the ends real quick. And I got my brush here, loaded up with some diluted black acrylic to do a darker spray effect on these kick-up lines.